Hello and welcome to an episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana, and behind me is the Indiana State House. We're going to go in. I'll tell you some factoids about Indiana like I do with most state capitol or state house episodes, and we're just going to pay tribute to the great state of Indiana. So follow me, let's get started. And in front of me is the most important building in the state of Indiana, the Indiana State House. And I'll tell you some facts about the Hoosier State. The top 5 largest cities in this order, 5. Number 5 is Carmel, which is just not too far from here. Number 4 is South Bend, going north, actually north to the border, to Michigan. And then to the south, way south, is Evansville at number 3. Number 2 is Fort Wayne. And number 1 is, of course, Indianapolis. Indiana was admitted to the Union on December 11th, 1816. It was the 19th state. The overall population is around 6.8 million. It ranks as the 17th most populous state in the United States. As far as population density, it ranks number 16. It's the 38th largest state by area. So far, only one president is from the Hoosier State, and that's Benjamin Harrison. However, on the flip side, interestingly, 6 of the 48 people who have served as U.S. Vice President are from Indiana. Of course, most recently, Mike Pence. You also have Dan Quayle and 4 others. But there are lots of famous people who were born and or originally from Indiana. The list is actually long, but I'll start naming off some names. Like Cole Porter, Orville Redenbacher, Carol Lombard, Jim Davis, the guy who created Garfield, Axl Rose, Ryan White, James Dean, the Jackson family, John Mellencamp, who is famously from Seymour, south of here. Don't know if he lived in the pink house. And of course, Abraham Lincoln grew up here as well. Some other fun factoids. One of the state's main nicknames is the Hoosier State. In all honesty, I do not have a clear definition of what a Hoosier is. They say it's an Indiana thing, but I do not know. It dates back to the state's early days in the 1820s. That's all I can tell you. The state is also known as the Crossroads of America, as is Indianapolis, but also Terre Haute has that distinction too, as well as a city in Ohio. The state song is On the Banks of the Wabash. The state bird is cardinal. There is also even a state poem. The state did not have a flag until 1917, but there are a total of 19 stars in the flag, which represents Indiana being the 19th state. And then I'll tell you more about the original state capitol and that historical marker up there. But now we're going to make our way. Got to cross the road though. So right at the left part of the entrance is a historical marker by the Indiana Historical Bureau. It doesn't say the date, and it's kind of short and sweet. The state capitol was moved to Indianapolis 1825 from Corydon. The capitol, built on the site in 1835, was raised in 1878 to make way for the State House, completed in 1888. Okay. In front of the entrance is a monument dedicated to Oliver Morton, who was the governor of Indiana during the Civil War. He was a friend of Lincoln's. There's actually more to say on the back. There's a couple plaques that say something. So I guess I'll go ahead and read the plaques in the back. Born in Wayne County, Indiana, 1823. Died in Indianapolis, 1877, age 54. Admitted to the bar in 1847. Served as governor of Indiana from 1861 to 1867. Served as U.S. Senator from Indiana from 1867 until his death in 1877. In all ways and at all times, the friend of the Indian soldier, the friend of the country, the upholder of Abraham Lincoln, the defender of the flag and the Union of the States. Patriot, statesman, lover of liberty, heroic in heart and flexible in purpose, and ever to be known in history as the Great War Governor. At the annual meeting held in June 1904, the Department of Indiana, Grand Army of the Republic, an organization of the honorably discharged soldiers and sailors who served in the Army and Navy to preserve the integrity of the Republic of the United States of America in the Great Civil War from 1861 to 1865, memorialized the legislature of the state of Indiana to appropriate sufficient money to erect this monument to perpetuate the memory of Oliver Perry Morton, the Great War Governor of Indiana during that period. Now I'm inside the State House, and I'm greeted, of course, with a rotunda, which I'll show you in a minute. I'm going to see if there's a bust of Abraham Lincoln this way, then I'll take you inside the rotunda. Yes, indeed. Abraham Lincoln, hopefully you guys know his connection to Indiana. I mean, yeah, he was mostly associated with Illinois, but he was born in Kentucky, but his family moved to Spencer County, Indiana in 1816. And we all know his story. He became a lawyer, served in the Illinois government, elected president, was president during the Civil War, and then his body actually lay in state on the grounds, and then in death, his body lay in state in the rotunda of the Indiana Capitol that preceded the one on its way to Springfield, Illinois. It was part of his, his funeral train. So, from Washington, D.C. Now they are setting up something, some sort of group, but I will show you some plaques that circle around there, so follow me. Starting with a plaque about Sarah Tittle Bolton, Indiana's pioneer poet. In commemoration of her creative work, this plaque is placed by Indiana branch of the National League of American Pen Women. The winds of heaven never fanned, the circling sunlight never spanned the borders of a better land than our own Indiana. Alright. Now we're going to go over there. And here's a plaque for Wendell Willkie, who was once ran against FDR for President of the United States. That was in 1940. He was a Republican Party nominee. I always forget that he's from this state. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's buried south of here. And this is nice. The Hoosier Medal of Honor recipients dating from the Civil War to Vietnam, Mexican campaign, during the many conflicts of this country. Really cool. Frances Elizabeth Willard, in honor of one who made the world wider for women and more homelike for humanity, intrepid pathfinder and beloved leader of the National World's Women's Christian Temperance Union. This was placed here on September 22nd, 1929. Here's something I didn't know. The first formal religious service in Indianapolis was held on these grounds. In 1819, Rezin Hammond, a Methodist, conducted the first religious service under a walnut tree. In 1821, the first church organized in the Isaac Wilson log cabin by Reverend William Cravens. So yeah, that's the top. Now this is not the very top. They're actually working on it, like I said earlier. But like I do in every state capitol, I'm going to stand right in the center of the rotunda. And also on the first floor is the governor's office. The current sitting governor, the time I'm doing this video, is Eric Holcomb since 2017. But of course, I'm not going to go back there. I'm not special enough. Now there is also a ground floor of the state capitol, which is floor number 1. I'm going to see what's down there. Okay, apparently there wasn't really much to see down there except for office buildings and cubicles and, I don't know, media offices. And then the door right there is the office to the Indiana Secretary of State. And of course, they also got to have a bust for Benjamin Harrison because, yes, he is the only president that was elected from Indiana. And yeah, there's his grave in his house that's here in Indianapolis. And also, I'll read off what it says right here. Of course, he was 23rd President of the United States from 1889 to 1893, an Indiana Senator in Congress, a volunteer soldier in the war for the Union, a lawyer of distinction, and a citizen faithful to every obligation. Very nice. All right, now I'm on the second floor of the State House. That is the Legislative Offices Agency. That is the House of Representatives offices. Now, I'm not really quite sure what these are. They look like phone booths, wooden phone booths, like the old ones Superman used to come out of, but I know that's not it. Let's see what we got. And I don't know what it is, but I find these staircases very cool, even though it's kind of dreading to go up there. That is the office of the Lieutenant Governor, the number 2 person in charge of the state. And outside the office is the statue of Indiana pork. Now, blue and gold is the Hoosier State's colors, as I mentioned. And what else we got here? A tribute to agriculture, looks like. They got some tractors, hard hats. Huh, pretty cool. I'm gonna go across that way in a second. Looks like they got some busts around here too. Like that one is Frank O'Banion. Lived from 1930 to 2003. He was the governor of Indiana from 1997 to 2003. Also, he was well, before that, he was a lieutenant governor and state senator. And behind those glass windows are the Senate chambers. That's the door. Of course, I can't go in. State senators. And over here is another bust, Robert Orr, who was the governor of Indiana from 1981 to 89. He served in the Army in World War II. Thank you for your service. He also served as ambassador to Singapore from 89 to 92. How about that? And here's a bust of a woman, Julia May Carson. And throughout her life, she worked to overcome barriers imposed on her and on others by racism and sexism. She was elected to the Indiana House of Representatives in 1972 and served 2 terms. And then she and Katie Hall were elected to the Indiana Senate, the first African-American woman in that house, where she served for the next 14 years. And then she was eventually elected to the U.S. House in 1996, becoming the first African-American woman to represent Indianapolis. And she served until her death on December 15, 2007. And then here's the entrance for the Indiana House of Representatives. And that's where they're behind those windows. And then down that way are the courts. So now I'm in the appellate courtroom. Wow, they got all the judges on the wall. And the present members of the Supreme Court of Indiana. That's where they all sit. I will now move the podium. Stained glass windows. Very nice. Alright, so now I'm on the 4th floor, the top level that is. And yeah, I guess I'll start this way and work my way, you know, to that side. Follow me. That's a House Committee room. And I'm pretty sure that's the House Ways and Means Committee. Chairman of House Ways and Means Committee. And some more offices. I'm curious as to what this is, though. These are all the first women in government in Indiana, like the first woman to be elected Indiana Lieutenant Governor, Kathy Davis, who is up there on the right. And then the first woman appointed to the Indiana Court of Appeals in 1978, the one that's in the middle up there. Top left is the first woman to become a federal judge in Indiana in 1984, Sarah Evans Barker. There's many more. And down below are pictures of Indiana victims of violence. Very sad. All ages as well. Wow, just look at the glass ceiling and everything. Wow. Oh, look, the one tile's open. Man, it's a good way to get some fresh air. It is getting a little drafty in here. Oh boy. And I've only visited a few state capitals, you know, the inside of them, but for the first time ever, I've encountered a meditation room. I guess it's more of a spiritual room, but this is dedicated to Beth Bowen. or Bowen. So this dates back to 1962. Wow, really nice. And I guess this is where you drop your mail, U.S. mail, or that's what they used to do with snail mail before email. And since I'm on the top floor, I'm going to look at the balcony, look below me. Okay, look at that stained glass roof. And there's a statue, or I'm sorry, a bust of George Washington. Okay. I mean, we all know who Washington was. First president. But yeah, I mean, really he has no connection to Indiana, but unfortunately, but I think I'm really glad that they paying tribute to him over here. I want to see if there's a bust over there, somebody. No? Well, it's a statue of, let's see. Okay, so this is known as Indiana. The statue was made specifically for the Columbian Exposition in 1893 in Chicago. And it was done by Indiana artist Heretta Matthews to be on display in the Indiana building. Now, it's also known as the Chicago World's Fair. And it was to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's trip to the New World. But yeah. And here's a bust of George Rogers Clark. Now, his brother William was, of course, part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And if anybody does follow this channel, I did go to the George Rogers Clark Historical Park in Vincennes. But he also, he's best known in Indiana for the retaking of Fort Sackville and Vincennes from the British in 1779, of course, what I just mentioned. And he led military actions in the Northwest Territory until the end of 1773. And he retired at Clarksville, Indiana, which was named for him. But he is buried in Kentucky. So, nice tribute to him. And that is the state's second highest court, the Court of Appeals. And lastly, the official mascot of the Bicentennial. Now, in 2016, Indiana celebrated its Bicentennial. And fourth graders named Abe its mascot on Statehood Day, December 11th, 2015. So here is the bison. Cute, isn't he? I didn't even know there was bison here in Indiana. I know in Montana there, or some of the western states, yeah. Alright, so yeah, the Capitol was very interesting. I mean, it had all the government offices. I saw the governor, lieutenant governor's office, the statewide offices, like the, what do you call it, the House of Representatives and Senate and the courts. But I mean, I kind of wish there was a little bit more interesting stuff in there, but you can't have it all. And of course, unfortunately, I came when it was under construction, but hey. And once you leave the Capitol, you get a nice view of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, which is just a block away. But unfortunately, it is under construction. Otherwise, I'd do a video on it. But it'll be up and running a fall of 2025. In other words, a year from now. And on the southeastern part of the Capitol grounds is a statue of Thomas Andrew Hendricks, who is Vice President of the United States with Democrat President Grover Cleveland during his first term. Well, remember, this guy did not serve 2 consecutive terms, but he died in 1885 in Indianapolis. He's buried at Crown Hill. One of these days I'll get around to visiting his gravesite, but he was the governor of Indiana from 1873 to 77. He also held offices like the U.S. Congress, U.S. Senator from Indiana, as well as the Commissioner of U.S. General Land Office from D.C. Behind the statue is a Indiana marker about the Lincoln funeral train. I'll get to that in a sec. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start on the other side because that's side 2 I'm looking at. But here is the Lincoln funeral train. Assassinated President Abraham Lincoln's funeral was April 19th, 1865 at the White House. The funeral train left for Springfield, Illinois, April 21st, directed by the military. Stops en route allowed mourners to pay homage. In Richmond, Indiana, Governor Oliver P. Morton boarded. Then train reached Indianapolis April 30 at 7 a.m. Buildings were draped in black. Look on the other side here. In the rain, Lincoln's coffin was escorted along crowded streets lined with soldiers to Old State House, located here. Reporters say at least 50,000 people viewed Lincoln's open casket in the rotunda. Through streets lit by bonfires and torches, coffin was returned to Union Depot. Train departed at 12 a.m. for Michigan City, last scheduled Indiana stop. This was put up by the Indiana Historical Bureau and Indiana Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission in 2009. And I'll show you another statue. This is George Washington. First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. I'll show you what the sides say. One of his quotes: observe good faith and justice toward all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct. And this was presented to the people of Indiana from the Freemasons of Indiana, the George Washington Commission, the Grand Lodge Free and Accepted Masons of the state of Indiana, May 19th, 1987. And another quote on the right side: my attachment to the society of which we are members will dispose me to contribute my best endeavors to promote the honor and interests of the craft. All right, thanks for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. Well, I hope you learned a lot about the state of Indiana as much as I did. So, thanks for tuning into this special State House / Capitol edition of Historically Marked. I am Jason in Indianapolis, signing off.